Egberto Willies is a political activist, author, political blogger, radio show host, business owner, software developer, web designer, and mechanical engineer.
And dad.
And dad. How wonderful. He's an ardent liberal that believes tolerance is essential. His favorite phrase is political involvement should be a requirement for citizenship. Egberto's weekly program, Politics Done Right, airs at 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. Egberto Willies, welcome back to KPFT's Open Journal.
Thank you so kindly for having me once again. I mean, I enjoy being with you, Stephanie and Duane. It's always great to be here.
It's great to have you on, Egberto, and thank you for coming in a certain sense, doing double duty by being here with us, as well as, you know, you've got work to do in producing your own important program here at KPFT. So tell us a little bit, if you could, about your background and what it is that brought you to this beautiful place that we all call home now here in Houston, Texas. I'm not a native. You're not a native. Stephanie actually is a native, one of those rare breed of Houston natives, but I know that you and I are not. I'm a New Jersey boy, transplant. But I've been here so long that I can say y'all now and feel comfortable.
I can say y'all too, and I am actually the real Southerner. I'm from way, way south. I'm from Panama, Central America, and school brought me here. So I came here to go to college, and as what happened to a whole lot of people when they come to the United States of America, a lot of us stay because, you know, it's a land of opportunity and all that wonderful stuff. And you know what? When I came here in 1979, it was the land of opportunity. And as soon as 1980 come, unbeknownst to me, that was when the slide began for it slowly not being the land of opportunity that it was intended to be, that most of us who came from afar were actually looking for.
So what if you were to describe that year and that switch?
That is when, but you know, I have to confess, I didn't know what was happening then, but that is when Reagan got elected. But I was too green to understand exactly what was going on in the country until later on to realize that was when the entire American dynamic changed, and so very few people realized it as it was happening.
It's sort of too close to the transition.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes.
Well, you know, as you look back and you say that you've been to Houston, even through this transition, you saw things happen as you matured, and you seem to take a very active role in taking a voice to say something about that. And with your show, Politics Done Right, you really use that platform to have these conversations. So if you could tell us, how long have you been hosting this show and introduce our listeners to it?
Well, I came to KPFT actually after giving a proposal to Ernesto, and actually Dr. Bradley here, and Ernesto approved that show. So, you know, I've always had a kind place in my heart for that because, you know, I was sort of a newcomer to terrestrial radio, but I was already doing Politics Done Right for several years prior. But bringing it to the state, I've always been a KPFT lover. You know, this has always been like the station that had progressive values, and I've always wanted to be, I've always been a donor, but I wanted to be a part of it, and got the opportunity, was advised to come and try, and then it gave that one other door to present the things that we needed to present as a progressive outlet. So I used the opportunity. First of all, and I like to make everybody know this, to be on air at a station with 100,000 watts is an honor. So I think you have to treat it that way, and that is one of the things that I always promise, that if given these kinds of opportunities, you have to make good use of it. The airwaves belong to the people, and what we preach on air, look, we better be the right thing for the people.
So you have a lot of people who call in, and that is a very unique math to sort of manage. How do you manage? It's easy to deal with those who agree,
right?
But how do you have those kind of conversations with people who don't agree with you?
Believe it or not, I prefer talking to people that I disagree with. I mean, I got some wisdom from a guy one time that said, if you know how to listen, and by the way, I wasn't always the type of person who knew how to listen. I learned that over time. But if you knew how to listen, you could get a whole lot of it. I joined an organization called the Coffee Party USA. And one of the things that organization taught me was the ability to, people don't have to sit down and agree with you. I don't have to agree with you to like you. I mean, the interesting thing about it is a lot of times you sit down and you're in a coffee shop and you're drinking coffee and you have a conversation about your kids or you have a conversation about something and you ain't get a clue what that person's political philosophy is, social philosophy, religious philosophy, but you like the person. And then suddenly you find out, dang, that guy is a evangelical right-wing. And it turns out then that if that is the case and you could have that conversation that had nothing to do with other stuff, people are really, I have this concept that I say most people are good. I mean, everybody, most people are good. It is what the system puts inside of folk to create this dynamic of dissension among people. And one of the things that I promised I was going to do, given this platform, is I was going to tell folks, let's not allow a system that depends on us to be at each other's throat to actually do things like vote against our own interests and give the power to the few who know how to keep me fighting against Duane fighting against you, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that sort of manipulation, the divide and conquer there.
Yes.
So you're mentioning the Coffee Party as kind of an entree that in some ways was what brought you to KPFT. And how does that activism impact what you do on a day-to-day basis now? Because you've been engaged not just with blogging,
right,
and doing an online internet version of Politics Done Right, but you've been involved with Netroot Nation and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, interestingly, anybody who knew me back in Panama in high school, they knew that I was a loud mouth, big mouth, all that kind of stuff, never took anything. And when I went to the University of Texas, I was also marching with the South African Liberation Action Committee with boots and berets and all that kind of stuff. So, the activism was always there. When you work for corporate America for a while, though, you kind of have to play it.
Rein it in.
And then when you establish your own software business or something, you have to kind of blog under a pseudonym. So I've been blogging under pseudonyms and all of that for a while. Now, I can say that what really changed was, I think, I'll be frank, having a kid and some day of the week sitting down in the dark and realize what comes after. And realize what that looks like. I sit down and wonder sometimes, don't folks really understand what's happening, where things are going? So, I mean, day to day, that is when I get up in the mornings, day to day, those are the kinds of, I'm kind of a weirdo, but those are the kinds of things that I think of.
Weirdo in which sense of that word?
Well, maybe I'm a nerd. I think I can admit that.
Okay.
You're working on it.
Yeah. I get up when I was writing software, I would dream
in code.
Okay. Now I dream in politics, so yeah, I will consider myself a nerd, but every time I do that, my daughter reminds me of something. Dad, but Revenge of the Nerd proved that nerds could be cool.
That's great. No, but it's definitely, you have a very eclectic capacity, which gives you a very unique perspective from the sort of liberal conversation in terms of capacity to the technical conversation to being able to use video and streaming, really bringing all of those pieces in to tell the story.
You know what is interesting? I always tell people this. I love the University of Texas. I always say things like engineering is like a great field, right? Because you learn how to kind of whenever you get into something, you want to know how it works. So when I got into, like, you do a lot of graphic design, right?
Yes.
When I had to do my stuff, I had to go into that. I notice how I was admiring your new book. It's because for me, it was like, oh, wow, I wonder how she did that. I wonder how she did that one. That is, so engineering gives you that kind of perspective that you want. Everything you see, you look at it from that standpoint. So I sit down there and I talk to Duane and I see how Duane tick, and I'm like, okay, let me see how,
understand
it's
that
just
more.
that kind of a thing, yeah.
So when you talk about trying to understand, and you come to the States from Panama, and then you really delve into American politics.
Yes.
And you understand it in very
Yes.
nuanced and complicated ways, and can really have complicated conversations about it.
Yes.
What really sort of got you into American politics and really said, this is a topic that I want to have these conversations about?
When you see things not working, when you sit down there and, first of all, when you listen to politicians make absolutely no sense and people worship them, when you see politicians hurt people, it makes a difference. When you see when people do things that doesn't conform to math, it's like, my big pet peeve is Medicare for all. It's like, for me, it's so obvious, if you have externalities that causes things to increase in price, the simpler method is easier. It's like simple. And when you have people whose job it is to completely change people's perception of reality, a reality that hurts them, it's almost impossible for guys like me not to engage. It's like you just can't let that stand. So that is one of the reasons that doing this. The only problem with it, it's not. After you've done your own business, you're a business owner as well, and you try to do this sort of stuff full time. It is difficult because it doesn't pay. And folks, that's why you should call 713-526-5738 and make sure that Open Journal is funded so that we can stay on here.
That's very. That is the part. You really are. There's sort of two parts. The amount of work it takes to find, keep, vet the stories, make sure that you're giving the listeners the most accurate, sort of non-biased conversation. It's easy to take what's out there and sort of regurgitate it, but to really do that research, that's a full-time commitment. And even if you volunteer your time in it, the physical space of keeping the lights on, keeping the audio sort of working, does take the
But
donations.
Stephanie, you also have to eat.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. At least a little juice. A little fasting or something. But it is a complicated balance.
It is, because when the passion doesn't always turn into a realization of your personal economy. And, I've been trying to create that fusion for the last 8 years. I haven't knocked on the perfect scenario yet.
Yeah.
But the right side of the aisle, are funded by a corporatocracy that has unlimited funds. We are doing things ad hoc, trying to survive as a radio station, trying to survive. And for those of us who do activism on a full-time basis, trying to survive personally.
Yeah.
It is not easy, but you know what? It is rewarding.
Yeah. So now, as you look at this evolution of technology, from blogging to streaming to radio, which is sort of switching over to podcasts, in some ways they're similar. It's just sort of a different sort of way of receiving it. Do you see some of those platforms being easier to monetize, or is there sort of new math that comes out of this fusion?
Well, the new thing is that, first of all, the monetization for what you're doing is going to require all sides. You have to do podcasts, you have to do vlogcasts, you got to do, just about everything. The issue, however, is, again, the corporate structure. Because, can I tell a 1 minute story? A 1 minute story. When I dropped my software company to do activism full time, it wasn't just a blind idea. It was that I could do a program for free, have a website that had a ton of traffic that could bring, based on my outside traffic, bring some income, not what I made before, but enough to survive. And then one day, Facebook said, we are going to change the algorithm, and YouTube said it as well. And in one day, I lost 90% of my income from my website. That is when a corporate structure, even as you think you have freedom, And when we rage against the corporate structure, those are the kinds of things that we have to look at, where they are the masters of everything. It's what I call it's a new slavery. And I had an interview with Dr. Richard Wolff, and I looked at Richard Wolff and I said, this is my theory. I think our current economic system is nothing more than antiseptic slavery. And, I am sitting down there talking to Dr. Wolff and saying, I wonder if this guy's going to call me a kook for saying that. And he said, no,
absolutely.
You're right.
Yeah.
That was confirming and,
Yeah.
So Richard Wolff is an avowed Marxist.
Yes.
And so he can be dismissed by the powers that are,
right,
just with the brush of the hand, as I just did, just by saying that.
Right.
And so the besmirching of him in one word can throw any value that he may truly have and a great base of knowledge to share, it can be dismissed out of hand. So I want to ask you, Egberto Willies, when we look at the conflation of someone who is talking about socialism being equated with communism and then stoking some kind of almost like a genetic fear going back to Leave It to Beaver days of air raid shelters and the Cold War and Russia, America, the Battle of the Titans kind of thing. How do you have that discussion with someone and break through that too easy to set oneself in the mind of saying, oh, well, she's a communist, he's a socialist, they can't do effectively in America, they're going to ruin the country?
I made the concerted effort to use the word socialism a lot less. And that is because you know what you just said about they can dismiss Richard Wolff as a Marxist, and once you say Marxist, nobody is listening. What I find by using the platforms, the internet platform, I bring a lot of folks in with the message, and people are there saying, "Oh yeah, wow, you mean, yeah? Why is it that the plutocrat makes all the money and I do the work? Why is it that the guy who just trades in stock is so much more worthy than a guy who invents something? Why is it?" And what happens then is when I tell them that, they ask those questions, guess what happens? They start to say, oh, I never thought about it that way. And then by not using the word socialism, you get them to think about it. Now, every so often, because I have a particular proclivity for a particular candidate, they would automatically assume that.
That puts you in a box.
That puts me in a box. And what I try to do is I leverage that by using the complement candidate that I also support as a backdrop. So, I mean, it kind of helps in making the message a bit wider. But we all need to get this stuff going. 713-526-5738. Folks, come on. You got to bring this show to the top.
Yeah, it's always great to have
you. So
you.
we are going to continue this conversation, Egberto, but I do want to check in with Maverick and Susan and Rick out on the other side of this glass cube that we are secured in to see if there's any activity.
There is. We are top of the last 9 minutes of our segment here, having a conversation with Egberto Willies, and wanting to know, you have done quite a bit since you've been on KPFT and just in general. Is there any hope? Do you believe that politics can be done right?
Yes, I'm a permanent optimist.
Oh, that's cool.
I am always optimistic, and I believe that people will change. I mean, and if you take a look at society in general, it always moves forward. You get a few steps backwards, but it moves forward. America is not the America that it was before either one of us were here. And it has changed. A lot of things has gotten a lot better. Some things have gotten, we've slid back on a few things, but we are making progress.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of folks are really upset, let's say, with the president that we have now, et cetera, et cetera. But I think having this president was an important a catharsis for this country, because we needed to understand that a lot of what we were doing was still sort of a facade, a scab on a sore that was still there. And all he did was allow a lot of people who thought things were different to be able to see themselves that no, things are not completely the way they need to be.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting when you say, however he does it, be it a tweet or a comment, and then the behaviors that people have, and they say, well, it's because of him. It's like, well, I mean, you acted on something. So really sort of being self-reflective and say there was something in you that acted on, whether he meant what he said or not. It's those that are acting on it that need to sort of reset.
I agree with you 100%. And I don't even look at the people's carnal reaction to let's say to not like them or to hate on them, because a lot of who we are is the environment that we grew up in.
Yes.
And if you can look at everybody and say you are that way because of your environment, the question is, are you willing to change what your environment had done to you? And so I think Donald Trump goes ahead and brings out a lot of bad things that people have within them.
Yeah.
Now that they have that exposed, are you willing to make the change that you know you need to make?
So when we talk about change in this upcoming election, do you think when we talk about policies and politics and party, has there been enough of a reflection from opening this wound that do you think the Democratic Party has a chance? Are they in their own way? Are they getting out of their way?
No, the Democratic Party, in my humble opinion, is in the way. But what I'm very happy for is all the progressive activists that I see moving around, not only Harris County, but everywhere that I go. I was in Philadelphia for a Netroots conference. I was in D.C. for a Bridge Alliance conference. And I see the young people of all stripes. They are saying, to hell with these parties. We know what we need to get done. I met a young woman. Her name was Brielle. And I interviewed her, and she said, we need to make activism, not sexy, she used another word, but she said, and that's where we are now, making activism sort of a form of life. That's something that you want to do, and that's where a lot of the younger folks are. And the older folk, well, they're dying out anyway.
Yeah. And the interesting part, though, the younger, they're living a whole world off the grid.
Yes.
It's pseudo names on social media. They're making movements that people don't know, that people don't see. And ideally, the notion that a country this size and at this stage of evolution would have evolved to just a two-party system,
it's crazy.
Seems a little bizarre. So, there is something to be said about this digital platform, and you have a digital platform, which we didn't talk a lot about, but EgbertoWillies.com. What can people find on your website, and why should they come and check it out? Because I think they should.
Let me tell you what I first of all, I cut videos, I look at videos, I do videos of what's going on in the country. I also give what I would hope is an educated opinion, an informed opinion on things that I find that the mainstream media forgets to put out or deliberately leaves out because of who their corporate masters are. So you come to my website, you get a whole lot of blogs, a whole lot of interpretation of the videos that you see on TV.
So not only do you have this, but you're an author as well, and we just want to make sure that people can find all of this information for your contact. If you could let them know and remind them how they can reach out to you and stay connected with you even after Open Journal, that would be wonderful.
Please visit EgbertoWillies.com, EgbertoWillies.com, and politicsdoneright.com. All the information to both my book, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, can be found there and everywhere else.
This is wonderful. So as we begin to look at our hours, and you have a optimistic view of the country's future and where we're heading?
Yes, I'm very optimistic that we as a country are going to do just fine. We have a few things that we have to work through, but we need to have people that are ready to uplift other people.
Egberto, I'm uplifted just having you here and hearing what you've got to share. I appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so kindly for having me.